הבהרה, התוכן המשודר מבוסס על עדויות אישיות של מרואיינים אשר נאמרו על דעתם בלבד. אין לראות בתוכן משום המלצה כלשהי לרבות המלצה רפואית ו/או נפשית, ואין לראות בו משום עידוד לביצוע פעולות כלשהן.
שלום וברוכים הבאים לפודקאסט המצולם של ישראל. היום אנחנו מארחים את סאמי, שיש לה סיפור מאוד מאוד מעניין. את רוצה להציג את העילה?
כן, קודם כל היא עברה חוויה כל כך עמוקה ומכוננת ששינתה את כל החיים שלה, בעקבות ניסיון התאבדות בגיל 38. הסיפור הזה בעצם קרה לפני כמעט 12 שנים, ועד אותו רגע של אותה חוויה, קלי האמינה שהיא בעצם קורבן של המציאות, של ההתעללויות שהיא עברה, של הגירושים, של נסיבות מאוד קשות בחייה. ובשונה מרוב החוויות של מוות קליני, אצל קלי, היא בעצם הביאה לסיטואציה הזאת שהיא חוותה. אחרי תקופה של דיכאון עמוק מאוד, ברגע גדול של ייאוש, קלי מחליטה להתאבד כדי לסיים את הסבל שהיא חובה, וגם בשביל הקרובים שלה כך היא הרגישה. היא חזרה לפה, לתוך העולם הפיזי, עם כל הזיכרונות ממה שהיא חוותה, יחד עם תחושה של שליחות מאוד מאוד עמוקה לספר את מה שעבר עליה, דווקא בגלל מה שהוביל אותה, כביכול לרצות לגדוע את חייה. בעצם יש לנו פה הזדמנות להציץ בחוויה מאוד מאוד עמוקה ששינתה את החיים שלה מקצה אחד לקצה שני, ואנחנו ממש ממש שמחים ונרגשים לדבר איתה היום. Shalom, Kelly.
Hello, Kelly. Shalom.
Shalom. Good to see you both. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming.
I really appreciate the opportunity, and I think that at this stage in all of our lives globally, the key messages for all of us are love and hope, right? I mean, it doesn't matter where you are on this planet. I think really what brings us together as a community in this way is we are all striving for love and hope. And with all of that said, there's also a lot of heaviness on our planet right now. And so I'll speak to when I was coming from that space of heaviness, which led to my suicide and the story that I'll share. In 2008, I had a lot of heaviness. I had a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety. For 38 years at that stage, I considered myself a victim of life. That's how I described it. I felt like everything was always happening to me. And I can remember having very light moments as a child, very engaged, happy moments of love and hope, but it was always peppered with anxiety and depression. And when something would happen to me in my daily life, I always seemed to perceive it from a victimization standpoint. Why is this happening to me? Why is life doing this to me? Why are my parents this way? It was never trusting. It was more of a why. I lived in the why. And I think when we live in the why, that just continues to perpetuate that victimization. So for me, for 38 years, there was just story after story of victimization, what I would call victimization. At this stage, I now realize it was story that was trying to unravel. But that victimization just continued to seal the deal in my mind. And I can't tell you how many times throughout my lifetime of those 38 years, suicide was a thought. I called it my plan D. And it's not a normal way to live life. You know, there's a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. And for me, there was always this elusive plan D. If everything else fails, there's always suicide, which I now realize is not a normal way of thinking. But, you know, and no one ever recognizing that I was going through that. And in that time and in those days, we didn't really grasp onto counseling or anything. I don't think anyone knew I was depressed because I was one of those people who hid it really well. I carried on with life. I always had a smile on my face. I moved through all of my normal activities. My own closest family didn't know how depressed and how anxious I was. I was really good at disguising it. So I would wait until everyone would go to bed and the house was quiet, and I would climb into our shower and I would turn the shower on and sit on the floor of the shower. I now realize not normal again. And I would cry. I would let all of that out. And then I would get up and do it again the next day. I was really good at hiding it, very good at disguising it. And you find that a lot of people who are truly suicidal, that is their story. So Plan D was always in the periphery of Kelly. And many things happened at this stage in 2008. None of them very, very grandiose, to be honest. Health issues, just normal things that all of us experience in life. But I can remember that Plan D, again, always being an option in my mind, and one particular day saying, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Which is a saying in the US, which kind of just says that was the last thing for me. So I had for many years kind of thought of ways that I would go about it. The going about it part never scared me. Being raised Catholic scared me because I had these preconceived notions that if I ever actually went through with it, that was a sin. And so that scared me. The pain of dying scared me. What is that going to feel like? What does the body go through, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously it didn't scare me enough to eliminate the opportunity that seemed to be presenting itself on this particular day. So when the camel's back was broken and the Plan D started to formulate itself, I carried on with what I had always envisioned, which was to take a bunch of medication that I had been saving with alcohol, and I wasn't a drinker. But I had researched enough of how to do this combination thinking that I would be fine. And off I went. I said farewell to my family. At this stage, I believed that they were actually going to be better off without me, that it was the most loving thing for me to do. And this is another preconceived notion that I really would love to dispel for people, especially if you yourself either struggle with depression or anxiety, or you have someone in your family who does. Please, I hear people often say how selfish suicide is or suicide attempts are, but I assure you, those of us who have acted on it, we truly believe that we're doing those that we love a favor by removing ourselves from their experience. And in a diseased mind, we don't perceive the fact that we could damage other people's lives by our absence, because we're so caught into the story that we actually will give them grace by leaving. You know, I want to make sure that everybody understands that, yes, it can be perceived as a very selfish thing, but in that moment, or in the moments when it arises, there's truly a belief, I love my family so much that by leaving, I'm actually granting them or gracing them without my experience of this. So that particular day, I packed a few things into my car, some notes to write, my medication, my favorite pillow that I wanted to bring with me. And I didn't want to do this in my home or where someone in my family would have to discover me. So I had planned to go somewhere very remote. At this stage, I lived in New Zealand. And we lived on a tiny island that you could only access by ferry or by air. And I drove my SUV somewhere very, very obscure and off, foreign, that I knew nobody would stumble upon me, and proceeded to sit there for several hours, taking medication and drinking alcohol and writing suicide notes. And as I was doing this, I just remember saying over and over in my head, this God is loving. This God will take care of me. I know that I was raised to believe that what I'm about to do is a sin, but I trust something in my heart that says this God will forgive me. And I needed that. I needed to convince myself of that. So as I'm writing these suicide notes one by one, that's the mantra, if you will, that was going through my head. And the last note that I wrote was to whomever I believed was going to find my body and have to care for this body. And I apologized to them. I felt strongly that they deserved some apology to have to clean up after this mess. So again, not normal thinking, very much a diseased mind. Mm-hmm. I felt the medication start to take hold. I could feel it. I was getting woozy and tired. And again, I was in an SUV, my vehicle was an SUV at the time. And I got out of the car and I took myself to the back seat, put all the suicide notes on the dashboard, and I put my pillow down and I laid down. And I continued to say in my head, I believe God is a loving and merciful God. I believe that God will forgive me for this. And then I just remember thinking, am I still breathing? Am I still breathing? And that's what I was watching for, because I think looking back on it, I didn't want to focus on what pain might feel like or what the body shutting down would feel like. So I think and I've never really been a meditator or anything, but I now realize that was a form of meditation, right? What I was doing was focusing so heavily on the breath because I didn't want to focus on what pain or guilt or shame or any of that looked like. Mm-hmm. So I just kept checking in. Am I still breathing? Am I still breathing? And that was just going over and over in my head. And the breath definitely slowed way down, like to the point where it was very shallow. And I knew we're here now. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I realized was popping and cracking sounds is the only way I can explain it. And it was nothing in my body. It was nothing outside of my body. I was it. Is the only way. And you'll notice as I describe this, I'll say things like, this is hard to describe. Words won't ever give it meaning for you because leaving the body is not a normal process that we can speak of. And so it's really hard to use verbiage to describe it, but I really do my best. And most of us who have had a near-death experience will say similar things. So the popping sounds were happening and there was this pulling sensation, but again, it wasn't that I was being pulled. I was the pulling sensation. I was the popping sounds. I was what felt like this momentum that was starting to take place. Now there was no longer any fear. I wasn't focused on the breath. I wasn't even at all concerned about the body, which I find so fascinating. Yes. To this day, I find it so fascinating. Yes. Yeah. So, the next thing I know, and again, I say next or the following, again, there was no time in any of this. That all, again, falls away. So there wasn't like 5 seconds, 5 minutes. The whole concept of time, body, me, all of that was disintegrating. It was melting away as if none of it was ever real. But there was no curiosity about that either. The curiosity is here now. Mm-hmm. As I think back on it, but in that space, there was no curiosity about how long has this been. The next thing I just knew was the pulling sensation again, the cracking, the popping, and this almost movement or lifting, if you will, or vacuum. And the next thing I realize is, holy heck, I'm looking at myself, and I'm above the SUV, and it's as if there's no top to this SUV. There's no roof. Mm-hmm. And just this noticing, almost like a movie, of this object beneath the energy of curiosity and nobody curious. Just this, what's curious and what is that? and there was no attachment to it. There was no sadness for it. I saw it moving. I could tell it was, again, look, hindsight being 20/20, it was writhing, it was suffering, it was dying, right? But I was not attached to it. There was no sadness. There was no desire to be back in it or to try to get back to it. There was no feeling. There was no pain. There was no suffering. There was just curiosity, just a real curious look at that. Look at that. And there wasn't even a, oh, you did it, or any of that going on. There was just, there it is. Just a curiosity of it and a witnessing of it. And that seemed to go on for a bit. And then the popping and the cracking resumed. The body at this stage had seemed to quit writhing and seemed to quit what I now would call the struggle. I now realized I wasn't in it anymore. And the next thing I knew was this, again, pulling sensation, but there was nothing being pulled. I wasn't a body. I was the pulling. I was the sensation. I was the cracking. I was the momentum. I was all of it. And it seemed to be an upward, if you will. And the next thing I know was just this, almost like I would describe a rocket ship or something, momentum and a thrusting into this energy of this thing expanding, just an expansion. And the way I describe it now is, imagine being inside of a sardine can or a tuna can. You know, you're just so trapped in that can, and that's what this body is. And this momentum doesn't know that anymore because it's not contained. There's nothing containing it. It's not a physical presence. Now it's an energy. And so all of a sudden it recognizes itself, because I now know we do this every night in our sleeps, this recognizing ourselves, the trueness of what we are. I think we've all had glimpses of that if we're falling asleep and we start to drift into that state of consciousness and wake up, you know, right before we land. People say I had a dream I was falling, or I had a dream flying, and I wake up and I get the sensation, but there's like a glimpse of it, like, oh, I wasn't a body. And I think everyone's had that. It's that times a million. That's the closest thing I can describe to it. And we've all had that. Most people have had some of that. So the next thing I recognize is the popping, the cracking, the sensation of expansion, the sensation of a pulling upwards, if you will, but nothing being pulled, no body, no other, no curiosity about the dead thing. And into what I refer to as the abyss, darkness. No me, no it, no nothing, but nothing fearful. When I say abyss, I know that word can have a connotation of scary. There was nothing scary. There was no, oh my gosh, I've gone somewhere horrible. There was no attachment to where I was. There was no fear of it. There was just expansion and a love like I have never experienced before. And the closest thing I can liken it to is the moment I held my baby son for the first time after he was born, and I looked into his eyes and I thought, I will never love something or be this loved again. And it was that million, more than a million, this love, this experience. And I wasn't getting it. I was it. And that's, again, an important distinction, because in this human body, things are happening to me. I am receiving love, or I am the giver of love. But in this experience of a near-death experience, you're not the giver or the receiver. You are it. It's the only thing there is. Wow. So expansion, this amazing love, this amazing abyss, no curiosity anymore or thinking or thoughts. What happened to that thing, that body thing? Who is that Kelly? Where am I going? Where am I? None of that is going on. And again, there's no space and time. And so I have no idea and no way to perceive how long I was in this abyss or in this love. I just recognized that there was no desire to go anywhere. I would have absolutely been completely content there. And the next thing I know, again, without any awareness of time or space, is, again, this sensation of a pulling, the sensation of cracking. I was all of that. The sensation of movement, but I wasn't anything being moved. I was movement. And a thrust into the most gorgeous pink I've ever experienced. I've tried to recreate it in painting and in drawing, and when it makes you kind of crazy because you cannot re-experience any of this here. The colors, the smells, the tastes that we attribute to this physical space are not the same. So I wasn't experiencing pink. I was that pink. And it was a blissful baby pink like nothing we've ever known here. And a smell like nothing I've ever experienced, almost like a gardenia flower. You know, the smells, the sounds. It was almost like there was an angelic choir playing, but no one doing it. It just was. And I wasn't hearing it. I was it. And I think that's, again, a really hard distinction to understand, not being it. Because, again, no coincidence. My whole life I was a victim of, and all of a sudden everything I'm experiencing is, oh, this isn't happening to me. I am it. I'm all of it. I am expansion. I am this pink. I am these sounds. I am these smells. But nothing was curious about any of that. It felt normal is the only way I can explain it, but so much love, just unfathomable amount of love. I don't know how long I was in this space. And again, there was no, where do I go next? There was no curiosity to get back. Do I get to stay? None of that was going on. It was just this amazing love. I am it. I am it. And a normalcy about it. So ordinary, like this is all I've ever known. The body part now, I realize, is the abnormal part. And so, again, there was no comparing to that, though. That's me now. And the next thing I know, I just became conscious or aware, for lack of better words, that I was being invited or called or, asked to come is the only way I could explain it without having a body of anyone to come. Coming was not the experience of like, here, come is let me walk over there, or let me get on a plane. But come in my experience was, it's known and I'm there. It's known and I am there, but there's no I, there's no body, there's no one experiencing it. I just knew that it was me to follow. Again, this motion of follow, but not having to go anywhere to do that. Just the state of knowing to follow, I was there. And I now say that what happened, many other near-deathers kind of refer to this as the reflection of life, or the viewing of your physical overview. And that's what was happening. I was feeling, seeing, knowing my whole 38 years, but it was just seconds. It was just seconds. And it wasn't, as we perceive now, it wasn't images. It wasn't, I had to have a movie. It was none of that. It was just in the space that I now refer to as almost like a tomb where we were. Very grandiose, very beautiful, very immaculate. I felt almost undeserving to be in this space where we seem to be. And again, I never was a separate being. I never saw a body or anything. There was just an experiencer of this. But a knowing that it was for the story of Kelly, because it was my ancestors. But it wasn't just my ancestors of this lifetime. It was all of these lifetimes, millions and millions and millions of lifetimes. And just a flicker, all of it in seconds, so fast. And none of it was punishment. None of it was, here you were bad, here you were good, here you were just, here you were unjust. This was a sin. This was magnificent. It was just a celebration of experiences. And I felt no shame. I felt no guilt. I felt no regret. I felt no, oh gosh, that's mortifying. I can't believe I'm seeing that. It was just curiosity is the only way I can explain it. Just look at that, look at that, look at that. How amazing. I don't know how long that went on for, again. And it doesn't really matter. It was just the life review or the life's review. Because again, it wasn't specific to just this 38-year version of Kelly. There were so many things. There was a knowing without any sadness that I wasn't going to stay there. And I don't know that that was with me in the expansion or it came at this time in the review. I saw some others from this 38-year ancestral line and had experiences with them from some painful things that did happen, but it was never to make it right. It was never to apologize or to forgive. So for example, without being able to go into every single one because there was just so many, I had a really painful experience as a young child. I was molested by my maternal grandfather at the age of 3. And that was never forgiven between us before he left his body. But in this experience, I was able to experience him. And there was no need for an apology. There was no need to make that right. It was just a known that he was someone that was rooting for me, that was saying, you know, when you go back, just know, we're here. You know, we're here celebrating you. Every experience, the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, the sinful, the just, all those things that you label. But there was no auditory. There wasn't a conversation like you and I are having. It was just a knowing. And I didn't physically see him. There was just a knowing of these energies that I was experiencing. But again, these things continued without any idea of space or time, without any fathoming a chronological order. And I'm still to this day getting downloads, if you will, from the experience 12 years later. You know, when I returned to my body and I tried to explain this to people, I wasn't capable to put words to it the way that I am today. I tried, but I struggled with it because I was still a vibration for weeks, even months when I returned to my body. It took time. It took getting back into the linear to then try to find the fingers to point to the moon, that I could in a way put the symbols together that at least gave you some recognition to try and understand or decipher what I experienced. I am tremendously blessed and I am tremendously thankful that I did not return to my body as the same person. That's the only way I could explain it. This body vibrationally was able to maintain some semblance of the experience, and that was the intention. And yes, I truly, and I speak to this every day, was shown soul plan, soul path, soul map, things that we're wishing to do as experiences in this linear 3D. And yes, I truly believe that part of this experience is the way that it is for this story of Kelly, which is how I refer to myself now, which may feel crazy to your followers. But again, I do not see this thing as separate anymore. I just can't know that. Still has the experience of pain and all of these linear things, but there's something more profound behind it, witnessing all of this, that I now feel stronger aligned to than I do to the physicality. And that was because of the near-death experience. And I think that's the reason that I'm able to speak to it in the way that I am, because I am given those words and given those recipes and formulas to try and make it more palpable for other people, to condense it in a way that they may not be able to feel, but they could go, okay, that makes sense. There's just something rational about that. And that's one of the things when I returned to my body and I was sharing, my partner at the time, you know, I'd hear him in the other room on the phone with the counselors and the people that were following up after my suicide. Is she okay? Or, you know, should we be concerned? And he would be saying things like, not knowing I was hearing him, if she didn't make so much dang sense, I would be worried. If she was speaking tongues or, you know, something, that I would be worried. But everything she says makes sense. And for weeks after this experience, you know, we had to put big Post-it papers on the wall because of what was coming through, again, condensed and with the experience, but also packets of information, as I refer to them, continued to come in this vibrational state that I was in. And I couldn't get it out of this body fast enough. You know, it was just coming through so fast. And wow. I was a molecule. I was a vibration. And so part of me was thinking, is this body just going to go away? Get it down while you can. So I was writing. I was like a mad scientist. In the near death, the thing that, you know, anchored me back into the body, you know, because we can talk about all the experiences that apparently happened to this story of Kelly on the other side. But the thing that seemed to have anchored and zipped me back was my son at the time was very young, but his 21-year-old version of himself told me I needed to come back. He needed me.
You're saying that you didn't want to come back, but you came back because you need to take care of your child?
This is the way I describe it now. Imagine a mirror, okay? See a big mirror that doesn't have any end. It's never ending. No edges, no corners, just never ends. I was that. We are that. Okay? Now, how can I know myself individually in that? Now, crack that mirror, and there's a million of me, a bazillion of me, a quadrillion of me. Now I know what it feels like to have an arm. I know what it feels like to experience. I know what it feels like to have a child. I know what I now have a bazillion aspects of me in these little broken pieces of mirror. We call it choice, but the reality is I came, I didn't come. I stayed, I didn't stay. They're all in parallel happening. Yeah, so we call it free will or choice, but the reality is they're all happening simultaneously to no one because we've never left the mirror. We just think we have as an aspect of it. And so the mirage that we return to in the physical body is, I am the one doing it. I am the one making the choice. But that same little shard of mirror sitting next to it is, I'm not the one doing it. So hearing the then adult son, knowing to return, no sadness, yet I now know that that also apparently did happen in the tantrum, energetic tantrum. Several things actually happened in that, but again, we won't go down that slippery slope. I just knew the body was going to be re-entered. crackling, sensation of pull, no sadness, no what's going to happen, sensation, and in the body again. And now there's ER people working on me. There's a helicopter there, again, where we lived, was on this remote island. I had been discovered, and I was being airlifted. Now, here I've just killed myself. They've realized they can't pump my stomach because it had absorbed far too much. So now they're monitoring me. They're taking blood. They're radioing ahead to the hospital. And I'm being airlifted. And I'm in euphoria. I'm in bliss. Here, I've just killed myself. And these people are, I'm trying to talk to them. And there's just this, mask over my face. And I can remember I kept trying to pull it off to tell them how much I love them and how much I appreciate what they were doing. And they think I'm resisting the help, because a lot of people who commit suicide are like, no, let me finish this. But I'm trying to hug them. I'm trying to love them. I think they ended up strapping my arms down or something. I don't know. But I was just smiling. I just felt such euphoria. Like I literally couldn't be contained in the body. I end up in an emergency room in New Zealand. In the ER in New Zealand, very similar to my experiences in ER here in the US, you're just in this little curtained room. You're not in a true hospital room yet, and they're monitoring you. And of course, I've just killed myself, and so they're coming in and taking my vitals and all that. Very noisy, hustle bustle like any other ER, and I'm in bliss. I'm just wanting to run up and down the hallways and tell everyone how much they're loved. And I hear this commotion. Happening. And the curtains open enough for me to see this young gal who was very obviously on drugs of some sort. She was out of her mind, literally on some kind of drugs, hallucinogenic of some kind, psychedelics of some kind. Wow. And her partner, boyfriend, husband, I don't know, is talking to someone there, trying to relay what's going on. And they lose sight of her for a few minutes. And she catches me in this crack of the curtain. And the next thing I know, while they're busy having a discussion about what's going on with her, she starts almost like a mummy or a robotic thing coming into my space. But I wasn't afraid of her. I wasn't scared like the old Kelly would have been. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And calling for help. I felt a trusting, loving presence. Our eyes are locked. I can tell she's out of her mind. Literally. And she stumbles to me and literally almost falls onto my bed. And as she comes into my face like this, eyes to eyes lock. And there's this deadened calm that goes over her. And very peacefully she says, I see you. And my whole body felt this love I've never felt before. What I get and what I experience now every day that I'm so grateful for is that we have that opportunity to have that moment all the time with each other. That is the mirror. That is the God that we are a part of, that we've never separated from. But to have this experience of an aspect of a Kelly, little shard of mirror that I believe myself to be, whichever version of that I've grasped onto in that moment, I have to forget it and remember and forget and remember and forget and remember. And these little I see yous that I continued to have, and I to this day continue to have, hers being the first and the most profound, was that mirror. It was me, my God. I am, I am. I've never been anything but that. Reminding me to remember You're back in that body. Don't forget what you are, though. Don't slip back. There's so much more to come. And so that continued. And that was the first moment I had to start trusting I wasn't that Kelly anymore. And again, I wanted to run through the hallways and tell everyone, do you know how loved you are? That thing wanted to run through the hallway and just tell everyone how loved they are. But this is again where I had to start trusting. And it was the first time I saw angels, my guide Bernadette, who I now actively engage with. Shh. Don't tell them. They'll lock you up. And it was the first moment, if you will, when the doctor came in after this experience with the woman. Are you seeing things other people aren't seeing? It's crazy to me that they ask someone that, by the way. Hilarious to me. Let's ask someone who just killed themselves if they're seeing and hearing. They shouldn't be. I don't know if anyone truthfully answers that, but I was clearly shown, you're fine, girl. And you tell them you're fine. And there was just a trust, blind faith, and a knowingness that nothing I've experienced in the 38 years prior deserves attention anymore. Put that aside. There's new tools here. There's a new way of being, there's a new way of seeing, and there's a new way of life. And we're going to teach you this. And here's your first opportunity to trust us. And I just knew to say, no, doctor, I'm fine. Do you know how loved you are? I think I said that to him, actually. Do you know how loved you are?
So what's important right now? The experience itself?
No. I love that question. I don't care about the gifts that this has opened to me. Please hear me when I say I appreciate them. I love them, but I don't care about them. I don't care about what apparently got to that, what apparently led up to that, or what apparently came from that, other than awareness. That's it. Consciousness, the thing that knows that it knows that it knows. Nothing more is needed. And of course, from that comes just unconditional love, like you can't package. And even calling it unconditional love already creates some disharmony to it by labeling it. But I can't go without saying unconditional love of this awareness that's just aware. All the rest of it is just storified stories. And they're doing themselves. The more we can rest in blind faith. And what I say to people that I work with is, we all have these beautiful things called breath and heartbeat, but we never stop to ask if that next breath is going to come. But interesting, that's how I left, right? Are you still breathing? Are you still breathing? Are you still breathing? And as I resumed, are you still breathing? Are you still breathing? But what I find interesting is I ask, do you ever check in? Is that next breath going to come? And unless you have a health condition or a heart condition or something, you just trust your autonomous system to do these things. You don't look at your chest and say, let me rip that guy out and make sure that heartbeat's going to come. And you certainly don't rip your lungs out and say, keep going, unless you have a health issue. Before coming back into the body, what the angels said to me, almost like a blessing as I was shifting back to that, your only role is to breathe and not resist. So profound that I've tattooed it on my body. Breathe and not resist. Notice this awareness, watching that breathing and not resisting. I'm not doing it. I'm not telling the body to do it. I'm not reminding. And even scientists have said that autonomous system, that automatic system is doing itself.
It's a miracle. And we just take it,
for granted.
Yes,
yeah.
like it's normal. But even the fact that we can breathe and there is a breathing and there is a brain that's a miracle itself. Like, so we forget the special things. And after having a powerful and profound experience, especially like yours, that you wanted to end your life because of all the difficulties, the struggling, the trauma, what can you say to people that are suffering so much that they want to end it and they don't want to live anymore? And I feel that it's not that they don't want to live, it's that the suffer is so huge that they can't handle with it. And as you said, it's not unresponsible people.
It's temporary. It's temporary. And you are so profoundly loved that if you can be with the discomfort, it will wash over you and let go. And what I've learned now is that washing through, or that flushing through, or that momentum of the suffering isn't even mine. But to get to that stage of being aware of that, first just requires a little mustard seed of hope, which says, I'm going to notice that for a minute. And as I notice that suffering for a minute, I notice I'm not it. Just by virtue of the fact that I'm noticing it tells me it's something separate, right? There seems to be something dualistic at play here that's happening. The one that sees it, the one that seems to be experiencing it, it's almost like there's all these actors in the room. I see it, I am experiencing it, I'm the one that thinks I'm feeling it. It's temporary, it's fleeting.
I also saying that to people that it's temporary, but I feel that they need to allow themselves to talk to someone. Sometimes they feel they are a burden because they're suffering so much. And for the person who is there for them, what he can do, it's listen with the heart. It's sometimes there is no answer. Just saying to someone, I'm with you. In this burden, you're not alone.
I think a lot of people who have anxiety and depression, hopefully this is shifting, but they hide it like I did. So no one knew how much pain I was in to even have that conversation. I was very depressed. I was going to a doctor. I was telling them I was depressed. They were giving more and more medication, which was making me sicker and sicker and sicker. I now know that medication actually gave me suicidal ideation, which, fed that plan D. But I also know now sometimes soaking in the discomfort is the very thing that we need to do, even if we're not yet at a place to share with another, to encourage them to help us. It's like the elusive monster under the child's bed. We all had that experience as a 3-year-old where we thought there was a monster under our bed or a ghost, and we would run from our door and jump without our feet getting near the bed. We thought something was going to grab us. But what I've learned is sometimes it's just lifting the sheets and looking under there and saying, okay, pain, okay, depression, okay, anxiety.
Yeah, even to do that, you need the courage, the initial courage.
Yes, that's that mustard seed of hope. And like Hila said, sometimes we're alone in that and we're unable to ask for another. So if that was the experience of your followers, notice it's temporary. Hold yourself if you can't ask for another at first. Hold yourself and notice how beautiful your arms feel, loving yourself. And then get the courage to say, this is scary, but I'm going to tell someone this is what's going on for me. And then the momentum will come from there. The guidance we have on the other side, the God presence we are a part of, ask and enlist for that help. I surrender to this. I surrender to this fear that I'm going to get through this. I am incapable in this moment. I am irresponsible.
You had your own trauma with your grandfather, and it's very hard to people to forgive after having a trauma, especially with family and people that are close to us. And your trauma was with family, and you became a different person. Can you tell us a little bit more about this soul family?
Yeah. So one of the experiences I had on the other side was seeing my soul map, my soul plan with my family. And again, being explained or given information to articulate this mirror that we talk about, that I allude to in the broken aspects of the others. So with going back to the comparison of the mirror, if I'm all of this, and yet there seems to be a part that wants to smash that mirror to go have experiences, how can I do that alone? How does a mirror know itself? So it needs another mirror, right? A reflection. I mean, anyone can do this. Walk and look at a mirror hanging on a wall. We all have some in the house. They give a very different meaning to me now. Look at a mirror and move away from it and say, how do you know yourself? You need another mirror. You need another aspect to know this thing we call dualistic. I want to experience love because as God, I'm all of that. So I can't experience it. Remember I mentioned, and he mentions as well, I wasn't experiencing a profound love. I was that profound love. Well, when you're in the body, now all of a sudden it shifts to, ooh, I am the experiencer and the receiver. I have duality now. I have the yin and the yang. But to be able to experience that with others, I need another mirror. I need others to love. I need others to break my heart. I need others to hate so that I get to have the dualistic components, the yin and the yang. So the soul chart or the soul plan feels like, you know, I've got grandfathers and ancestors and this and that. Sure, we can call them that, label them as you will. They're just crayon drawings. And I'm saying, okay, it's your turn to step in. And I've mapped this with God, which is my connection to all of this. And it's predetermined because every dualistic component, all of the broken shards of mirror are here. They're all here simultaneously. I can't experience them all at once. My brain couldn't handle that. So there's this linear definition of understanding others. But, you know, my uncle could have been my father, could have been my brother, could have been my stepson. We say, well, that's crazy. And I say, no, mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall. How can I experience all? I need to have others. So the soul map or the soul plan for this 3D, again, feels linear and chronological, and it feels logical because the mind needs these fingers pointing to the moon to be able to conceptualize. Everything has to be conceptualized to be able to experience it. So I think getting caught in the stories, the grandfather molesting me, can seem very painful when you're in the 3D element because you're thinking that happened to me. But when you're the mirror of it all, and I would never by any means go up to a small child and say, oh, this is just a broken part of your mirror. You know, that's not a kind thing to do, obviously. But speaking of it in this platform, I'm going to be very generic in the way I'm describing it. But please know that the compassionate part of me, which is still very much knowing of the human element, would never say that to someone. What I would say to them is, trust as you do with the blind faith that you have in that heartbeat in the breath, that the loving God that you are a part of would never, ever allow something to happen here. Would it not be for an overarching experience of you to know yourself?
So If your grandpa was alive, how do you think your relationship was between you?
Very different, because there would be no need for me to shame his obvious unwellness, his obvious life path, his obvious desire to know himself as more loved by having his absence of it, his desire to experience that level of sickness, which gives him the dualistic component, because to know the level of wellness, we have to have the yin and the yang. So that tells me he wanted to know wellness so profoundly, he also had to experience sickness. Mm-hmm. So people will say, why would anyone get cancer? Well, maybe in their 20s, they were the healthiest athlete. And part of their map was, I'm going to be an Olympic runner, and I'm going to be the fastest Olympic runner, and I'm going to be the healthiest, and I'm going to strive to be so well, to know that the dualistic component of, and later in life, I will have the dualistic component of sickness, which will take my body or not. And that is how it is able to manifest itself in this duality that we refer to as life.
Kelly, tell us, please, what's the most profound lesson from your suicide?
To trust each moment, even that one, right? Because even in that moment, what was being said over and over is, I know that God is so ever-present loving. If that had been the last thought versus that I can kill myself, if it had just been, I know that God is so present and loving, and it had ended there, that this pain that I'm experiencing right now is temporary, is a different entry than that I'm going to kill myself, right? So I think the most profound thing is rest with whatever's arising this moment, we call it this now, and recognize that it doesn't have to be believed. None of it has to be believed. Even if it's uncomfortable or it's loving, rest here for a second and notice, just like the waves on the ocean, it will shift. Just like the clouds over the skies, it will move. It's temporary, it's fleeting. So this arising is all that is. It's all that's here. It's forever shifting. Honestly, what it comes down to is it's all a mathematical equation. And I see everything as a big graph now.
So Kelly, tell us, what's the meaning of life? If we're going to say to people, look, it's temporary. So they're saying to themselves, okay, this is temporary, but after that, what's going to happen? What's the meaning? So if people will have the motivation for life, themselves in this reality, in a different vibe, in a different consciousness. So what's the meaning of this life?
I think the one profound thing we can all relate to, regardless of the experience we seem to be having, and it minimizes the word, so I'm going to say it, but then I'm going to add on to it, is love. And love is not a verb. It's not a word. It's not an action. It is a beingness, as I described, I experienced, and I am part of that. I've never been separate. I'm not loving and I'm not receiving love. I'm all of that, regardless of what seems to be transpiring in the story, which is storifying. I am tremendously loved. And even when I forget that, unconditional love is so unconditional that it's loving even when it's not being loving. Mm-hmm. Wrap your head around that one. That's the thing I think most of us NDEers come back with is, this is so simple. I say, I am the most ordinary person you will ever meet. I am the most vanilla, ordinary person you will meet. Because it literally is that simple. We being the mind mechanism has to distort it until it doesn't. So I love how Muji says, your role here is to unlearn. You're learning too much. Throw it all away.
Did you learn something about God that you didn't know before?
I am. For the first time, I understood I am. Please hear me. I am by no means diminishing the beauty of religion. I find beauty in all of the religions. I appreciate all of them, and there's truth in all of them. The problem I find is that we've humanized
God.
How can we integrate the love that God is, that is inside of us? How can we integrate this love into our lives?
Again, this is a very simple thing, but it's so profound. And I think anyone can relate to it, regardless of what's going on in your experience. In fact, I know they can. I work with a man who is literally a quadriplegic. He has no movement from the neck down. And he is the most blissful person I know. He doesn't have anything other to experience other than love and joy. And when you ask him, how can that be your way, given what you're experiencing? And it's the same thing I would say. This moment right here, even if I have to consciously notice the air I'm breathing, the cup I'm touching, the smile I'm seeing looking back at me, the warmth under my feet, the roof over my head. Start small, even if you can only find one of those things, right? If you're in a prison cell, and there are people in prison cells that can tell you they live in bliss, how is that possible? Because they can look in that space and find one thing to give all of their love to. And that one thing, and that one appreciation, and that one bit of joy, and that one moment feeds another, feeds another. And as soon as that shift starts to happen of no matter how bleak, no matter how deep in despair I am, even in the moment as I'm killing myself, is the breath still there? What a beautiful thing. It was until it wasn't. Finding that one mustard seed, you need just a mustard seed of hope. If that's all you can find in this moment, be with that. Just be with that. Make that enough. And then you'll notice tomorrow the mustard seed's a little bigger. And the next day it's the size of an acorn. And the next day it's the size of an apple. It's building momentum. You're not doing it, by the way. It's just that you're opening your heart. And just by opening your heart enough, it builds momentum. What you guys are doing, I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you for being ambassadors of love, because that's what you are. And you are showing up in the living room of people who only have that mustard seed. They're clinging to this video. They're watching it right now saying, oh my gosh, I hope something comes out of this that makes me not want to kill myself tonight.
That's exactly the reason.
That's a real disease, not only in Israel, around the world. That's why it's so important to hear your voice, and thank you for being the spiritual agent of love and give this information, this light. Thank you.
I'll be in touch.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.